Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, I am doing pretty good. I have to say, my family has been stressing like crazy because my youngest two kids, they fly to India on Wednesday morning, which is 2 days from the day we're recording.
Ooh.
And they fly out. And for weeks now, my son's visa has been hung up. And
Yes, I saw your wife post about this.
it was obnoxious and so stressful. And my daughter was thinking to herself, oh my gosh, what if I have to get on that plane without my brother? Like, I won't even enjoy the trip. And, how do you come home and be excited about everything that you experienced, knowing that your brother missed the trip because the Indian government couldn't grant a visa? And anyway, none of that came to fruition. We just yesterday, Sunday of all days, which, the time difference makes sense, but we just got his visa. And so I'm so thrilled. He gets to go. And yeah, they fly out in less than 48 hours.
That's amazing. I'm
Yeah.
so glad that came through. I was concerned for him when I saw that post sometime last week, whenever it was. So that's great.
Yeah, huge weight lifted off. In fact, our youth pastor who is going on this trip, he was like whooping all over the church the whole day because it was between first service and second service that we got the news that his visa came in. And so he was very excited.
Oh, that's good. I'm so glad.
Yeah. So how are you?
Ooh, I am doing pretty well. It's been an odd couple of weeks. Last week was spring break, and my wife and daughter went away on a girls' trip, and I stayed back with my son because he was working a lot through the week. And then this coming week, there is a professional counselors conference called CAPS that my wife is going to. And so I've had 2 weeks where my wife was gone quite a bit and I have missed her quite a bit. So that's just been a different and interesting dynamic. Lots of extra time to read, but I miss my wife a lot.
Yes, I'm always caught between those same two experiences. And mostly, I just miss my wife. But there's also this I get to do everything I want to do. And then you're doing your thing that you wanted to do. And you're like, yeah, I enjoy this, but I'd kind of really rather have my wife here.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and the things that I like to do, like reading, towards the end of the day, my brain just shuts down. And
Yeah.
I'm not even capable of reading most nights. So I don't even get a ton of that done. So then I feel like I should have and I didn't. And that's a lovely spiral to add on to things. But yeah, but I'm excited. My wife is presenting a workshop or presentation or something at CAPS once again this year, and I'm excited to hear how it goes. So that'll be great.
Yeah. I was actually looking at CAPS as a professional organization the other day and thinking, yes, I would like to join CAPS. In fact, because I'm a student, there's a student rate for becoming a member. And I'm like, you know what? I think I would like to ask for my birthday that somebody get me a CAPS membership. That's actually what I want
Nice.
for my birthday.
That makes a ton of sense. It's a great organization. My wife absolutely loves it and speaks incredibly highly of it. As a matter of fact, somehow or another, she's on the governing board of something related to it. So, yes, of course she is. But
You follow your wife's career way better than your description of your following your wife's career. I just want the audience to know that.
yes, it's true. Very few things give me greater delight than seeing my wife succeed because she's an amazing and brilliant human being. So,
But she's not on this episode.
nope,
So
nope. I did call with something else to talk about.
okay.
We dance around the topic of friendship in every episode. And really, it's the unifying theme of our podcast and really the way we do things. Like, this has grown out of our own friendship and the impact that it has had on our spiritual lives. And yet we have never actually directly talked in 2 years of doing this podcast about the concept of friendship as a main topic. And there is a particular aspect of friendship I want to talk about today.
All right.
I want to talk about this idea of adult friendships.
Yeah. So this is such a fascinating topic for me because my two best friends, right? Clearly you are one of them. And my other is the one that I talk about.
Woohoo!
Yay, you made the list.
I am giving myself a gold star right now.
My other is John, and he's the guy that I translate with. He makes a cameo appearance on this podcast a lot because I mentioned him quite a bit. But
Hi, John.
John does not live in Oregon. You do not live in Oregon. My two best friends are people that I connect with remotely. And I make opportunities to go see both of you in various ways. But day to day, my two close friends don't live in my space. And I've often thought about the need to develop friendships in this space. And to some degree, I have done that at times. But these relationships have never been as deep or as consistent or as impactful as my relationships with you and with John, both of whom I met in college. So I feel like on the one hand, I've got these two amazing examples of what adult friendship can be and why they're so valuable. And like, I could just talk endlessly about the values of friendship. And then I have these other examples of how forming adult friendships is so freaking hard. And I think, we got the privilege of meeting in college, which is such a great time to form a friendship, and we've just kept it. And I almost feel like if you didn't get that opportunity, it's going to be really, really hard to form a friendship after that point.
This is exactly why I want to talk about this, because first of all, I've been in a new place for the last 2 years and really been in a new place for the last 6 months, where I've been attending a new church and all those kinds of things, which has given me the opportunity to, at least it's an excuse to start developing some new friendships, right?
Right.
And so I have been working hard over the last couple of years, and particularly this last 6 to 8 months, to cultivate friendships. And I have found the exact same thing. It is incredibly difficult, incredibly complicated. And even what you were just saying, I have worked with a number of folks who are coming out of college, particularly into ministry. And when they get out of college, their friends that they have experienced this profoundly life-altering season with go to the four winds, and they step into this new role of ministry, and they experience this incredible isolation. And frequently, one of the key questions they're asking is, I don't know how to make friends. How do I do that? And I would suspect it's not just them. I think there are lots of folks who are following Jesus, who are trying to figure out, how do I make friends? And it's really hard. And on the flip side of this, incredibly valuable. I also have my two closest friends don't live in the same state as me. You live in Oregon. My other closest friend lives up in Illinois. And I've known you since college. I've known him since I was like 8 or 9 or something. And how do you make that kind of connection once you're an adult?
Yeah. For me, there are so many barriers to forming adult friendships. One of them is time. Like, I would love to spend enough time with another person to be able to really build a friendship. But when am I going to do that? I mean, I go to work full time and I go to school full time and I have a family and I have all these obligations. And so does the next guy in line that I might consider building a friendship with. So when exactly are we going to get together? And then I have a highly specific set of interests. There's not a lot of people that just want to sit down, like in my context. I know this is a controversial statement, but it adds to the flavor of why I'm so unique. There's not a lot of people that would want to sit down at a bar, have a beer, watch a baseball game, and talk theology, and then possibly translate the Greek text later. Like that
That's
number is a very small number.
yes, very limited number of people in that situation.
Yes.
Yeah, those, I think you hit on. I'm trying to think if I can think of any other limiting factors. I think you're right. It is my time, their time, and the pool of people who have similar interests. I think
Yeah.
that's exactly it. Like I'm in the middle of trying to set up to grab lunch with one of the guys at my church, and his normal responsibilities and my normal responsibilities overlap in such a way that there's a limited number of options per week. And this week doesn't work and next week doesn't work. And so we're like 3 weeks out to grab lunch together. That's
Yeah.
just hard and it feels weird.
Well, and taking it back to the college experience, right? And all of the time that we were able to spend together during our college days, literally because our schedules allowed for it, we lived in the same space and we had limited responsibilities. And so you put that concentrated time into connecting with another human and a friendship comes out of it. Well, if you try to put the same number of hours into a friendship under those constraints, and you can meet for an hour every 3 weeks, oh my gosh, how long before you build up that many hours?
Yeah, absolutely. I have landed on, and I'm not sure if it's correct, but I have landed on a belief that college creates a false set of expectations about friendships in general that is potentially very damaging because it
Hmm,
sets the bar a certain way because of what you just said that worked in one single era of life. And at least for this middle era of my life, it is not going to work anymore. What's
right.
fascinating to me, just to add some perspective to this, my parents are both retired and they have incredibly vibrant friendships with a wide variety of people. And they joke with me every time I talk to them about how many different people they are having coffee or lunch or breakfast or dinner or whatever with. Because suddenly, as retired folks, and my parents are not like do nothing people, like they're doing a million things and they're really involved in family and church and all sorts of stuff, but they have space in their lives again for relationships on a different level. And they have, to their incredible credit, capitalized on it,
Wow.
which is super cool.
But super discouraging as well. Like I'm, in my early to mid 40s. Now I have to wait until retirement age before I can connect with people.
Yes, this is why the question that I have, or the tentative belief I want to put forward that is both discouraging but realistic, is that our expectations of what friendship is and how it functions, as created in our teens and 20s, is more unhelpful than it is helpful.
This is a brand new thought to me that you just introduced, and I'm fascinated by it. The idea that college age friendships set the expectations in unhelpful ways. And so, because you've been thinking that thought longer than I have, I'd like to know, do you have a new definition of friendship that is more appropriate to our space in life?
This is where it's so much easier to deconstruct things than to construct things. Um, and I did not, using that language could be a subtle dig at the folks who are using the word deconstruct in a religious sense. That was not my intention at all. I just meant in the context of what I'm saying, it is easier to take apart something than to put it back together. But I really wrestle with this. I think this is what forces me to ask the question, and I think this is what you're getting at. What does friendship mean in the context of a full and busy life?
Yeah.
And I've got some thoughts, and I'm curious to hear what you would add to them or whether you'd agree or disagree. As I think about this, I think that for my way of operating, friendships need some sort of, initially, I was going to say fixed points, meaning there's a specific time we're getting together. But I might want to broaden that out to friendships have some kind of rhythm of interaction. So I know I'm going to talk to you again soon. I know I'm going to talk to my friend Matthew in Illinois again soon. The way my brain works, that means it's on my calendar somewhere. I don't know that it has to be that way, but I have confidence that we are going to interact again soon.
Mm-hmm.
My definition of friendship, and I actually know lots of people who would not agree with me on this. If we don't talk for like years, it is not a fully functioning friendship.
Yeah.
It doesn't do anything for me. Like I don't benefit from a friendship that is an inactive friendship. And I have had friendships in that category, and my instinct on them is to diagnose what's wrong here, not to say, oh, I'm appreciative of this.
Yeah, I have a friend in this category, and I don't know if I go so far as to say what's wrong here, but more like how can we be closer, or how can we spend more time together? There's value here that we're not tapping into, and why, or how can we overcome that, are kind of some of the questions. I still don't have answers, and that's why that friendship sits in that state. But I'm not as down on it, maybe. But
yeah, that makes sense. So that's one thing. I think friendships have to have a rhythm. The other thing that I think about, and again, I'm not sure if this works or not. This is a really complicated thing to put in words, and I've never thought it before. So hopefully it's not crazy talk. But if it is, at least it'll make for a good podcast. But you know how, like, in certain video games, you have a certain number of, I don't know what the word for it, like life points, and you break them up between like strength and agility and wisdom and whatever. Like, you know what I'm talking about?
okay, all right.
Here's the hypothesis I want to put forward. We have a certain number of friendship points that we need in our lives, whatever that number may be. It may be an 86 for me and a 93 for you and a 24 for somebody else, doesn't matter. But I need in my life 86 friendship points. In college, I could get that from a significantly smaller number of people because I could see them far more often. I think as an adult, I need to get those friendship points in a broader range of places, often in smaller doses. So if we make friendship a scale rather than an on-off switch, it's not, yes, I'm friends with them, no, I'm not, but I have a certain level of friendship with different people. Some of my need for friendship is going to be met by people at work, even though on a scale of 0 to 10, I'm really only at a 2 with them. That still gives me some of the friendship points I need.
Mm-hmm.
My kids, as they have gotten older, I get some of those friendship points met there, and that's okay. That's good. So I guess I'm saying I think we need to broaden out where we get our friendship needs met, and we need to look in our existing universe for where we can get those friendship needs met, even if it's in less than ideal or imperfect ways.
Yeah. Well, I like this concept. I want to adjust it a little bit because
Please, because I'm making it up as I'm going along here.
I'm not one that can spread his friendship points around too broadly. I really value depth in friendships and in people.
Mm.
And There's just certain people I couldn't put on the friend list, even at a 2, just because we can't connect in a deep way. There are some people that just don't have that depth. And that's okay. It's not that they're bad humans. It's just that I'm not going to get my friendship needs met there. And so because that is such a high value for me, it limits the number of people that I could put into that category. And it also says I have to keep that number somewhat limited because you can't have depth with 100 people. So I think I'm just wired in such a way that, yes, I could be more broad than I am, but it doesn't mean broad is the only way to achieve my goals.
Yeah.
But what I really like about what you're saying is if we think more broadly, like I'm going to use a real world example. There's somebody at my church that I recently had coffee with, and both of us were acknowledging our need for friendship and kind of like, hey, maybe this is a relationship we want to take in a deeper way. And that's really where it stands as of today. So I have nothing more to say on whether it will or won't beyond that. But as I talked to Shelly about it, she was like, well, how do you feel about professional wrestling? And I'm like, I hate professional wrestling. I think it's the most ludicrous soap opera for men ever created. She's like, well, this guy talks about professional wrestling all the time and gets a huge kick out of it. So maybe you need to adjust your thinking. And I'm like, I can't imagine ever sitting down and watching professional wrestling. That just sounds like a nightmare to me. But this person, despite their love of professional wrestling, has depth. And this is a person that I could genuinely talk theology with. And I could talk, we have so many other things in common in terms of just our core values that I'm like, I could really enjoy a friendship with this person. So it does lead me to the question, like in terms of like broadening out, right? Maybe we're not going to sit at a bar and watch baseball together, but could I, for the sake of a friendship and for the sake of a common connection point every week or whatever, like I don't even know what night of the week wrestling happens, but let's say it's Friday nights and it's like, okay, we're going to watch the Friday night match together. And that's just what we're going to do for the sake of having that touch point and consistency and connecting in depth in other ways. Could I do that? And that's a question that I'm being challenged to ask myself because of your reflections on breadth and.
Well, and I think you make two really important points here. One is that I think there's a hidden reason why we found it easier to make friends in college. And that is back then, we were far more flexible about our sense of self.
Hmm.
You were probably far more likely to be open to doing a new thing when you were 20 than when you're 42.
Sure.
And I know this. I don't know if you recall this, but I got into running because it was the only way to spend time with you.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, I want to hang out. We work together, whatever, but like, when can we get together? And you were like, well, I run on Saturday mornings. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm running. Let's do that. And I had not run consistently ever before that. I run 10 to 15 miles a week still, but really it started off as a decision to enter your world and adopt a hobby that I was not particularly interested in just because it was like, oh, all right, if that's what you do, then let's do that.
Hmm.
And I don't know how willing I'd be to do that at 43. So this is one thought. I think one thought that I had here was perhaps one of the key ways to develop friends is to engage in their hobbies. And perhaps on the flip side, one of the valuable ways to develop friends is the thing that we don't want to do, which is to open ourselves up to something new. Man, I want a friend. I just want a friend that's exactly like me. May not be the best way to start off a friendship. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
And I'm laughing at myself and you in that because I think that's what we do. Man, I want a friend who's going to be exactly the person I want. Then you don't want a friend, you want a mirror.
Hmm.
I think friendship has to be openness to the other And that means investing time in the other. Like you said, I think this is a great example. What if that person likes wrestling for a really good reason? And part of the other that you are going to encounter and have to come to appreciate is the other that likes wrestling.
Yeah. Well, and I even threw up a little test balloon because one of my coworkers really likes wrestling. And I asked him about it. And he gave me an entire history of wrestling. And he grew up in Massachusetts. And so he talked about the New England wrestling circuit when he was a kid and how big and awesome it was. And all of these pockets of wrestling all across the country. Anyway, his excitement got me excited. And he started talking about how wrestling came to be what it is today, and but all of the nostalgia that he has around it and all the storylines that he has in his head around it. This is his childhood writ large. So it made it make sense to me why somebody would be so into wrestling, and made me think, okay, this is not my story. It's not what I gravitate toward, but I could see how somebody would grow up that way and think that way and get excited and carry that into their adult years because it was so influential in their childhood. So you're right, though. You have to open yourself up to another person and another way of thinking, another thing that they might be excited about that you never even thought had value.
And maybe this comes back to how my definition of friendship has changed. I think we often start as adults looking for friends that are going to meet our needs. And perhaps we need to start looking for friends who are different from us, compatibly different, but different. And we're just looking to experience somebody who's different. And who knows where it's going to go? Maybe there needs to be a flexibility and an openness to it. It doesn't need to look a certain way or be a certain way. It's just there's a need for flexibility. There's a need for openness, a need for curiosity, a need to be interested in people who are other.
Can I don't want to trash on what you said. That is not my intent.
No, by all means.
I absolutely agree with everything you're saying. And then I'm realizing that there are members of our audience. I know I have felt this way. I have seen my wife feel this way, especially after the pandemic, where you go, I am so desperate for a friend and somebody to live life with. I don't have time for all that patience. I don't have time for all that. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't. Opening myself up to whatever happens. Like, no, I just want a friend, and I want somebody I know that I can count on, know that I can be compatible with, and dive into life together. I don't want all of this waiting and hoping.
I totally get this. One of the jobs that I have right now is working as a facilitator for an organization called Kinship that is an online organization that facilitates groups for people who just want connection. They are addressing the loneliness pandemic. And you make a great point. I think there needs to be short-term answers and long-term answers, right?
Hmm.
How do I just experience a sense of connection now? And how do I seed potential for future connection in my life now? And those aren't the same question, but they're both really important.
Yeah, they really are.
What I wonder about, there are only two possibilities for the immediate connection that I can think of. Those possibilities are opening myself up to a random experience that is sort of a risk that someone else is providing me with. This is a church group or a community group, like my local library has like a knitting group, things like that. Or an online group, like I saw in Facebook recently, some organization was promoting this sort of weekly writers get together where everybody is writing at the same time, but they're in this Zoom group together so that they're kind of connecting while they're writing. Thought that was a really creative option. So there's these sort of trial and error potential things. And then the other option, I think, for immediate sense of connection has to be looking backwards, right? Who do I know that I haven't talked to in a while that I can connect with? Those are the only two solutions to that I can think of. Can you think of others?
No, and I really like even some third combination. So it's not a third way, it's just a combination of those two. Okay, I need a fixed point. I need a reason to get together with this person that is from my past. So if I look at that friend, I would put them in the friend category. You would put them in the non-friend category. But anyway, the person that is in my life that we have not spent a lot of time together, it's an inactive friendship, as you said before. If I take that individual and say, okay, well then how about I get 2 tickets to a concert that we're going to enjoy? Or what if whatever, you create the experience and invite them to the experience as a point of connection. And so, do you want to come watch WWE SmackDown with me on Friday night? Whatever it is. I like that. And I think you're right. We just have to be willing to take those bigger steps, either going and joining some other existing activity or to create an activity to bring an old acquaintance back into our lives. And I think those are good starting points.
And even just reaching out, like one of the things I've done because of my coaching work, I've reached out to a host of folks I haven't talked to in sometimes months, sometimes years. What's amazing to me is the vast majority of the people that I've reached out to have been more than happy to talk to me. And a number of those conversations, I have walked away feeling a sense of deep connection. And it was just a catching up conversation. I had a deep connection. I'm not necessarily guaranteeing that we're going to talk every week or every month or every whatever. Some of them I might, some of them I might not. But there are 3 different people that I did this with who all said, wow, I just really want to keep a connection. Why did we lose that sense of connection? I don't understand. We need to keep that.
That makes such a good point, because just as much as we're feeling this lack of connection and needing of friendships, the next guy on line that we would be tempted to reach out to is feeling the exact same way.
Absolutely. Yeah. A buddy of mine from back in Boston, I haven't talked to him more than once in the 2.5 years I've been here in Springfield. He is super, super busy. He's actually just taking over as the lead pastor of a really big church, a church that's in the middle of a whole building project. I mean, if there is a reason to be busy, this guy has it. And yet, when I reached out to him, we had a great conversation and we were both like, hey, why don't we do this more often? And we have started talking again on a consistent basis. Matter of fact, I'm talking to him later this week. And I think this is important for 2 reasons. One, just reaching out for the sake of reaching out is fair and valid, and nobody's going to mind that. But somebody has to actually do it. And second, technology gives us this opportunity to reach out to people who aren't in our kind of everyday sphere. I can have friends in Illinois, Massachusetts, Texas, Oregon, all over the place. And that's amazing.
Yeah, it is. I guess I would say that I know one thing that's lacking in my life is friends in my space. And I remember I don't even know what I was doing, but I went out with a couple of guys to do something a number of months ago. And my daughter said, "Where did Dad go?" And my wife was like, "Oh, well, he went out with some friends." And she's like, "Dad has friends?" And I mean, she knows that I, record a podcast with you and meet with John and all that stuff. But what she was saying is, Dad has local friends.
Yeah.
That just tells you what I am lacking. And so I need a hiking buddy, or I need a hunting buddy, or I need a guy to go have a drink with, or whatever it is. Man, I have mentioned drink 3 times. Just so the audience is aware, my last drink was probably 3 months ago. I never drink, but it's a nice little thing to do with a friend. So there's that. Anyway, I know that one of the things I need is just somebody to do things with locally.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I think what you're saying about creating space by creating a thing like, hey, I'm going to invite some friends over for wrestling or whatever. I think as challenging as that is, I think that's what it takes. Somebody's got to take initiative.
Yes. Hmm. Well, I want to turn to the audience and just say friendships are challenging. And if you've got a close friend that you've had for years and years and years, continue to treasure that friend. We obviously treasure our friendship, but it is long distance and we can't meet all of our friendship needs through one another. So how have you learned to navigate adult friendships? What advice would you give to folks? And could you use this episode as an opportunity to reconnect with somebody and say, hey, what do you think about this episode? And what do you think of the fact that we haven't connected very much lately? And I would love to renew that friendship and have an excuse to get together more often. So we would love it if this were an opportunity for you to reconnect with somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the huge reasons we do this is to create an excuse for you to have a conversation with somebody in your sphere, maybe somebody that you haven't talked to in a really long time.
Yeah,
We would love to give you that excuse.
no doubt. So with that, I would love to turn the conversation to you, Josh from Missouri. What else have you been thinking about?
Ooh, well, I preached at my church last week and
Yay!
yay, yes, it was super fun. I loved getting to preach. It was a delight to do so. And I was really struck. I was preaching on the end of Jesus' explanation of the parable of the sower. So if you kind of loosely remember, Jesus preaches the parable of the sower and the seeds. Some seeds falls on different kinds of soil, whatever. And then the disciples have no idea what's going on. And so they ask him, and Jesus explains. And he says this kind of complicated quote from Isaiah, I teach the crowd in parables so that hearing they won't understand and seeing they won't, whatever. I'm misquoting horrendously. I didn't preach on that part. Um, so I don't need to know it. But I was really struck by the fact that Jesus uses what I assume was a very common proverb, sort of like we use "it is what it is" at the end of his explanation. It's a proverb that he also uses in Matthew in a different context. And I have imported Matthew's meaning or the Matthew context meaning into the Luke situation when that is probably not what Jesus was talking about. You know how you can say it is what it is to like 500 different things?
Yeah.
Well, in Matthew, Jesus uses the saying, no one after lighting a lamp covers it with a jar or puts it under a bed, but puts it on a stand. Talk about how we should be good witnesses. But in this context, where he just talked about how the word of God is hidden and he's only revealing the meaning of it to a select group of people. And so, again, the word of God is being hidden in this group of people. After saying all of that, he says, no one after lighting a lamp covers it with a jar or puts it under a bed, but puts it on a stand. I don't think he's saying just, hey, be good witnesses. I think he's saying, and don't worry, I know I just said I'm hiding this from the crowds by telling them in parables, but I'm not doing all of this work in order to keep it hidden. I'm just hiding it right now to get this thing started. But the whole point here is to light the lamp in order to eventually put it on the stand. This is going to be something that becomes public. We just haven't gotten there yet.
That's super intriguing. I imagine you're right. I would love to reread that in light of that because, wow, that's good.
And it does two things. Number one, it answers something very confusing that Jesus is saying. Jesus, why are you talking in parables? Because I don't want them to understand. Well, that matches the gospel the way I understand it. Right? Like, and the only reason I think we don't catch this is one of those moments where the subject break makes it feel like Jesus is starting a new topic when he's not. There's just a giant subject break there. So we start as if Jesus were starting fresh with no context. If that subject break weren't there, we would immediately ask, okay, what does this proverb have to do with what Jesus just said? So I'm just really intrigued by this. And I hope that I'm reading it right since I have now preached on it. but I thought it was really interesting the way we import Matthew's meaning into Luke in a way that we should know better.
Yeah. Which is fascinating because that's when you do textual criticism, right? Textual criticism is comparing all of the different textual variants in all of the manuscripts that we have for the original languages. And one of the things that textual critics do is to try to determine where did this variant come from and why did it appear here? And one of the common things is for a scribe to accidentally say it the way another gospel writer said it. And you just import like, oh, I know this verse. And so you just start writing it by memory. And you're like, oh, wait, no, Luke actually says something slightly different here than Matthew. And that's where some of these variants come from. And so it's fascinating that you're talking theologically, we're bringing in those various things as well. So it's just cool.
Yeah. So that's what I've been thinking about. What about you? What have you been thinking about?
So I have a book recommendation. And
Ooh.
yeah, this is super fun. This is a book that I heard about at a conference that I went to, and it's called Unaccountable: What Hospitals Won't Tell You and How Transparency Can Revolutionize Healthcare.
Ooh.
It is amazing. It is an actual medical doctor exposing all of the different unaccountable systems within healthcare and how doctors are largely not answerable to anyone other than their hospital administrators who primarily care about bringing in enough money. And there's no incentive in the medical system to minimize doctor errors or medical errors, because at the end of the day, if a doctor makes a medical error, then that patient stays in the hospital longer and is charged for more services. So there's nothing from the administration's side that would induce them to really hold doctors accountable for medical errors because it ultimately pads the pockets. So it's not a problem from their perspective. The only thing that would make it a problem is if this information were known to the public. And at the time of his writing this book, which is about 10 years ago, there was no way to access this information. The public could not find out how many medical errors a hospital makes, a particular doctor makes, or whatever. That information is not publicly available. And I don't know if it's been since made publicly available, but at the speed at which things change, I kind of doubt it. It's just been a fascinating book about accountability, about how systems work, about healthcare. And the big takeaway that I've taken from this is the only way to really get good data from a consumer's standpoint is to start asking around at your hospital. Who would you go to for the best service? Which doctor would you go to? Which nurse would you go to? They all know who the good folks and the bad folks are. They live it every day, but there's this veil of secrecy and institutional silence around it. And so it's been really fascinating to find this guy has done a bunch of research, and the internal scores that teams give, like who are the good doctors, who are the bad doctors, really match actual data that hospitals have collected but not released to the public about who are the good people and who are the bad people. So people just know. So ask around. That's been my big takeaway from it.
What was the name of the book again?
Yeah, it's called Unaccountable. It's the main title, subtitled What Hospitals Won't Tell You and How Transparency Can Revolutionize Healthcare.
That sounds fascinating.
Yeah. It's by Dr. Marty Makary, Makary.
Man, I'll have to add that to my list. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's just one of those like reading widely sort of things. Like it's a great out of our normal genre read.
Yeah, that's great. Well, hey, are you ready?
I am ready. In fact, we had a technological problem halfway through recording this episode, so I feel like doubly ready. Like I can't believe we've arrived at the Which Josh question.
Dun, 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 dun. Here it is, ladies and gentlemen. Which Josh has been swimming in the ocean in a hurricane.
That, okay, I'm super intrigued. That's not me, and I want to know the story.
All right. So yeah, this is me. I grew up in Rhode Island. There was this one time where there was a hurricane out on the ocean. It hadn't hit shore yet, but it was the swell was just insanely high. And my dad is the kind of person who's like, well, we'll just give it a shot. And so we went and you know, one of the problems with going to the beach in Rhode Island is that there's like one really good beach, and anybody who's listening to this who's ever lived in Rhode Island knows what beach that is. And I'm not going to say it out loud because I don't want you to go there, because I want them to get to go there and there not to be giant long lines, because getting there is horrible. The traffic to get to this beach is just horrible, horrible, horrible. And so going at a time when fewer people were likely to be there was incredibly appealing. So we went, and the waves were like twice the size of waves I was used to. The undertow was insane. I remember like I was probably 8, 9, 10 years old, somewhere in there. And like, instead of being able to like just have it kind of carry you to shore, it like picked me up, spun me around, threw me back down. I fully lost track of which way was up and which way was down. And, you know, and my dad was amazing in these kind of moments. He didn't pressure me to go back out, but he also said, hey, look, like you've got choices here. And if you want to not be afraid of something, you get up and go back to it. And so after having been like thrown around by the hurricane waves, we just went right back out and kept doing it. And it was a really fun memory of hanging out in the ocean with my family, being able to see kind of the hurricane out to sea, but it hadn't hit us yet.
Wow. That's interesting. So, you know, I have always lived on the West Coast, other than my couple of years in Missouri and Illinois. But I grew up out here. I live out here. And one of the realities about the Pacific Ocean in Oregon, Washington area is significant rip currents and undertow that you can't see, and a lot of dangerous ocean conditions. It's not to say that you can't get into the ocean, but you do need to watch for rip currents, and you need to be aware of what the ocean is doing. And my wife, who even lived at the beach for a time, is very keen on what the ocean is doing at every turn. And she pays attention to a lot of the fatalities at the beach. And she's very, very cautious around when to enter the ocean and what is it doing, and never turn your back on the ocean because there's a lot of sneaker waves and various things. So I'm sure she's listening to this going, I wouldn't have done that, because it's super, super dangerous. And a lot of people out here get killed for taking the ocean a little too lightly.
Absolutely. And I would not recommend this, A, at all, or B, particularly in other areas of the country. Because the general undertow of where I grew up is not as significant as other places in the country. So we were starting from a safer space. And that makes it a different situation.
Sure. Yeah. But that's wild. You get to say, yeah, I did that.
Yeah, that's exactly it. But speaking of things I'm going to do, are you ready to record another episode next week?
I can't wait. Let's do it.
All right. Well, then I'll talk to you then.
All right. Bye.
All right. Bye.